Hi all, Peter or Roll for Kindness here. So today, instead of talking about the Caravan Endures, because I haven't had a chance to really do too much work with the betas, I'm gonna actually talk about a kind of common thing I see a lot with newer DMs and kind of the way I work around that. And so I wanted to share kind of this model I have for coming up with session plans for your D&D sessions. So what it all comes down to is finding ways to form relationships between each component of your game. So when you're creating a D&D or TTRPG session, you're thinking about the plot, the characters, the map, the monsters, all the mechanical stuff, kind of the end point of where you want your players. A lot of people will sort of focus really heavily on what they think is the most important part of it. So for example, if it's going to be a dungeon crawl, people will really focus on creating a compelling dungeon. If it's going to be a more social situation, they might completely throw away all the mechanical stuff and focus on the role playing. My approach is to make sure that each one of these components is effectively addressed and that they all tie into each other. So I kind of came up with this model 2 years ago. I have a background in teaching, and when I was getting my master's in education, I remember working on doing lesson planning and thinking to myself, this is a lot like doing D&D session planning. And then, years later, I'm doing D&D session planning and thinking, this is kind of like lesson planning. So I started thinking about the idea of lesson goals that, you would want your students to have and how you kind of scaffold those. And so I kind of came up with this model of having an end behavioral goal, kind of like this triangle. And at the top, there's the end behavioral goal. This is the most important thing that you want your players to have. Now, since I run social skills groups, it's really important for me to really pay attention to what the youth's goals are. That might be helping them work better as a group, helping them find their voice, helping them get better at reading social situations. So whatever the thing that youth and the group as a whole needs to work on, I kind of set as my North Star. I say, okay, this is what I want to see. Let's work around that. So say I'm at the beginning of a quarter. Big thing I want to work on is group cohesion. And so I would set that as my goal and maybe look at each individual player if I'm familiar with them, if I know how they work, and what sort of uh, gameplay scenarios they tend to find themselves in. That's going to give me a lot of information to kind of work for. So I start with kind of a group behavioral goal and an individual behavioral goal. And you can apply this to non-therapeutic or non-social skills groups fairly easily. Just kind of think of what is the end goal for this character and what is the end goal for the group. So set that as your North Star. Next up, you want to focus on the role-playing stuff. Look at what NPC interactions are going to be happening, what's going to be happening between your characters, and how that's going to be supported in the game. So think about what NPCs there are, think about what sort of dilemmas, any meetings, any sort of situations where there might be arguments or debates or revelations. And then along those same lines, you go to the next level, plot. And now I find that, in order of significance, the role-playing and plot can be reversed pretty easily. I tend to put the role-playing a little bit higher just because I run a social skills group, so the role-playing is super important. But the plot stuff can be just as important, if not more important, for other groups. So then you start thinking about the plot. How is the plot going to support the role-playing? How is the plot going to enable these social situations, which in turn enable the big plot goal or behavioral goal? And then finally, below the plot, you look at the mechanics. This is the dungeon map. This is the the monsters. This is any special abilities. You think, okay, what can I put in this world that the kids can interact with? What can I put in the game? What does the game support to enable these role-playing scenarios, these plot scenarios? These could be magical devices. This could be something as simple as a door that is very difficult to open. Um, say you have a door that the kids need to get through, and only one character has the strength bonus to be able to open up. Uh, then that's a mechanical goal that supports all the way back up to the behavioral goal of putting that one individual kind of on the spot and putting them in a situation where they have to do something, they have to help the party, and that builds up a feeling of camaraderie, teamwork, agency. So by kind of connecting all these different pieces and linking them together, you kind of can create a much more robust campaign. And at the same time, it's important to both look at this for the group and the players. And the one thing I found pretty consistently is that whenever I do this, and do individual kind of goal setting and creating things in the game that are in essence designed to incorporate well with a character, I found that I'll use maybe 3 of them. I run 2-hour long sessions, so there's just not enough time. But I found when the groups are really struggling that this pays off. Um, putting that extra attention to just build a really robust, really well planned out campaign helps. And I think there's this real kind of push in the RPG community for more minimalist DM planning. I agree with this to some extent. I used to be the type of person that would write 20 pages of plot and all this detail and 40 NPCs and just all this stuff, and barely any of it would get used, and most of it was effectively worthless because it did not incorporate into what the main plot or the main goal was. I just liked world building, and this was an excuse to do what I loved. Um, that's ultimately, if you enjoy it, nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't necessarily create a better campaign. Instead, if you're going to put the time in to do really detailed stuff, think about it in a very structured way. Focus on what's relevant and what the real focus needs are. Because if you're spending all this time creating NPCs and stuff, but your dungeon design is really boring and all your players want to do a really fun hack and slash thing, then you're just setting your group up for failure. So just by being a lot more aware of the various components around your game and the various goals you have and how they interplay, you can create a much more robust thing. And again, this does create a bit more work. Every time I do this, it adds a fair amount of time to my DM prep time. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it actually helps you start thinking about everything you put into your game and think, what is the function of this? How is this helpful? How will this meet some goal? And I think by creating a system that forces you to ask those questions, it helps you make games that are better tailored to your players. Anyways, that's kind of my spiel on goal-oriented session planning. I will be back with another devlog for the Caravan Endures, but in the meantime, if you like this video, check me out on Twitter. I'm Roll for Kindness, and thanks for watching.